Okay, so we're picking up tonight on the divine feminine, and we're talking about Peace Pilgrim. And we're on chapter 9, the extensions of pacifism, right? Because we know that she literally dedicated her whole ideal and life to peace, which is one of the subsets of love, actually. So it's definitely our divine ideal, inspiration. So pacifism, which really has much in common, probably ahimsa is a little deeper and wider in its ideology, but it's along those lines. It's probably a subset of ahimsa. He says, she starts, many people know the simple spiritual law that evil can only be overcome by good. Pacifists not only know it, they also attempt to live it. In their attempt to live it, they refuse to use or sanction the use of physical violence. Those who oppose war but would use physical violence in their personal lives, I would call war resistors, but not pacifists. Those who use the nonviolent method only because they believe it to be the most effective method, I would call nonviolent resistors, but not pacifists. Pacifists use the nonviolent way because they believe it to be the right way, and under no circumstances would they use or sanction the use of any other way. All right, I'm going to throw that out there for you. In light of the fact that, the Bhagavad Gita is told around a war, and also in the New Testament, there's this idea of a war raging between good and evil. Do you think that that is a valid thing, that there under no circumstances is violence ever the answer? Anybody want to chime in on that? Do I have
Perhaps
to
premeditated violence
premeditated violence? Okay.
would be wrong. And
Meaning that you
anything
were the
that,
one that was violent first?
well, like putting a forethought into something violent versus natural protection over if somebody's trying to kill your children or,
Oh,
something
right.
like that, that kind of violence. Those things are instinctual versus a premeditated violent act to think I'm going to hurt this person
Mm-hmm,
for a
mm-hmm.
gain, I think.
Yeah, because I don't know, in my own mind, uh, I think there's a place for violence. I think sometimes there's a place where it's going to be necessary. I mean, if your neighbor is violating you in some space and you've approached them and you've spoken with them and you've called the authorities and you've done all of the opportunities, to try and work it out, and it simply doesn't work out, it's by violence, I'm not going to mean you need to go over and physically hurt your neighbor, but like you need to perhaps like in a provocative sort of way solve your problem. Like if it's the where the fence is put in, you need to go over and just move the fence, or just take the fence down or whatever. And like between, you know,
Swami,
I,
I have an idea.
yeah,
Swamiji talked about this. He
uh-huh,
said nonviolence is for the monks. He was talking, I would think, about Jesus's ideal of if a man slaps you on the left cheek, turn the right cheek to him. In other words, complete surrender to whatever's happening without resistance. But he said for the householder, absolutely, you have to resist if necessary. And Sri Ramakrishna talked about it too, I think in a different way. He talked about you have to hiss. The snake has you have to hiss in order to prevent harm being done to yourself or to your family or to your people that you're around. But you don't need to go to the extent where you're going to kill. But again, I think it depends totally on the circumstances. I think for her, she's very much got that monastic attitude. Under no circumstances will I ever be violent. And
yeah.
she lived that way.
Swami,
But,
I think I
but
have something I could add.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if he was finished yet. I don't know when to jump in.
Sorry
go
about
ahead.
that. Okay.
Oh, is he finished? I'm so
Yes.
sorry. I just didn't know when to start.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. As you know, have a son that's 19, and his entire childhood, he was bullied horribly. And it got worse and worse and worse to the point where I had to figure out how to solve the problem, and discussing it with teachers and principals ended up making it worse because the kids were it just was a big nightmare.
Yeah.
So I went actually to the Vedanta and I spoke to Krishna Prana because she's a retired school teacher, and she she kind of caught me off guard, honestly, because I've been always telling him to turn the other cheek, and she told him to punch him in the nose once. And I just went, oh, wait a second, we can't do that, blah blah blah. But her reasonings, still I have a hard time handling it. um where because they'll learn their lesson and they'll respect you. And sure enough, he was very young when this happened. He punched the kid right in the nose after they'd been bullying him really bad, and the kid just like shook up in complete shock and just stood there with his eyes big, completely surrendered. Eamon was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? And then walked away. And the teacher witnessed it. And I thought for sure Amy was going to be in trouble. And she said, oh, Amy did a great job. He did exactly what he needed to do. He taught that child a lesson and it really needed to be done. And I'm like, oh, didn't see that coming. And then as he got older, it's got bad. That's when I talked to Krishna Prana. And she said, put him in martial arts. So that's what we did. And now he's just won the Arizona Open. He's undefeated, but he is the most peaceful, empathetic warrior as far as I'm athlete.
Yeah.
I don't even like to say warrior, peaceful athlete, because he doesn't, will probably hopefully never need it because he can use his words. So in the end, I still have mixed feelings because I can't stand violence, but it was necessary. And he has self-esteem. So that also creates energy when you have self-esteem.
Yeah.
And people don't see this little kid that's vulnerable and they can attack. They see a strong man, but with wisdom. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably my consensus as well. It's like only because yes, as a person, we value peace and we value wisdom and we value dialogue and we value taking the diplomatic route as far as we possibly can. But there are people in this world who will take you beyond your limit, who will they won't stop taking from you. They won't stop stomping on you. And those people, it's because they value their violence and you're not speaking their language. They're interpreting you as weak or interpreting you as a wussy, a wuss, and are just going to keep riding over. But when you learn to speak their language and communicate to them in the same way, saying, no, this is the line, since you can't hear it this way, boom, right? And you just give them just like that, just a single punch, just a demonstration. No,
It's a
you know.
crazy one for me when I suddenly realized that Jesus's way that they just referred to is amazing courage and amazing strength.
Hmm.
Uh, whereas I heard people say, "Oh, that's exactly what you just said, Wussy. That's really weak
Yeah,
and it's
that's
meaningless."
definitely the dialogue nowadays, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm here for, I found it hilarious the first time I heard Jesus called woke. Oh, he's woke. I'm like, you're doggone right. He's the wokest of woke, right? Enlightened.
Um, it was also difficult to understand because woke is good. You're awakened.
And
And
originally that's what the word was. When
yeah,
politics got hold of the word, they twisted it.
yeah,
They twisted it. And but initially it was a word that came out of the black community, and it was meant for people who had become aware of the black struggle,
yes.
and were being respectful and trying to move in a new direction, in interpersonal, in our respect for one another. That's initially what it meant. It meant to be enlightened. It meant to be educated. It meant to be understanding. And when politics kind of took it, it did what politics always does. It turned it and made it an unacceptable thing. But yeah, it's a difficult thing to know. I like the distinction that Swamiji gives because Swamiji gave it, but also
Um,
because it makes sense to me. Monks, I don't think have any business being violent. Monks, we've renounced everything. That's part of everything, and you accept whatever is going on. I think that's the right thing. But to make a distinction with householders, because a householder has a responsibility for family and for the vulnerable, and for people who can't defend themselves. I think at that time, it's one thing for you to give up your own property and for you to give up your own body or your own circumstance, which would be what a monk would be doing. But it's another thing when you're giving up your family's and your children's property and your family and your children's food and, their safety. That's a very different manner. And I think that's why there's a distinction there. There's a different type of responsibility there. But I think on both cases, yeah,
uh,
it is our nature to be at peace. And what Jesus also says, there's a place where he says, in as far as it has to do with you, be at peace. So that there is a measure of the other going on there. You do as much as you can for peace. When what you're doing is no longer keeping the peace, you've done what you can in that regard, and I think you can go beyond it. But there
quick
is room.
question.
How it depends on how radical you want to get in your faith, because I think there is room, for everybody to take refuge in the divine and really leave it to the divine. I think there's room for that, but that's a very tall order to expect of ordinary humanity. I think.
Question, Swami.
What's that?
Am I allowed? Quick
Yes,
question.
of course.
Two. One was the original question you asked about nonviolence and pacifism. I was wondering whether that is like asking about non-racist versus anti-racist. Is it similar to that, the distinction? That's one thing. The other thing is, now before you start, I was wondering if you would say where you are in the book, because I just discovered that I have it on PDF here. I was quite happy.
We're on
And
chapter 9, and
chapter 9, yeah.
chapter 9, and we just read the first paragraph.
Okay.
Swamiji,
Uh-huh.
even if the violent is like, say, not physical, it's verbal, even I think that should not be taken lightly, right? I have, when we were reading Ma Sharda, the holy, once or twice, she is supposed to be very humble person,
Mm-hmm.
but once or twice she gave back
You're
people
right.
who
You're right.
were, yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, she gave that who was it that chased her around the house? And she
Yes.
remembered her nature and she turned around and somehow grabbed his tongue and pulled it and then slapped him across the face to bring him
Yeah.
to bring him to understanding that this isn't going to happen.
Yeah,
Right?
that's a power, I think. Being
Yeah.
so confident in herself.
Yes, and it was necessary. She was defending herself. And so for her, she definitely taught us there's a limit. Her safety was being threatened. The man wasn't right in his head at that time, apparently, right? And wasn't stopping, was chasing her with violent intent on his part. And she was running, but he wasn't stopping. And so she said, the scripture says she remembered who she was, and she turned around, faced him, got him on the ground with her knee on his chest, and grabbed his tongue and slapped him across the face. Just,
Swamiji, then
mm,
then there's the example of the master who was in a semi-ecstatic state, and Haladhari, I think it was Haladhari, one of the temple people, actually came and kicked him while he was on the ground.
right,
And Thakur knew that if he told that to Mathur, that Mathur might have that guy killed.
right.
So he never said a word about it.
Yeah,
He just absorbed it.
yeah.
There's all these
And
different cases, different
yeah, really,
circumstances.
because there's yet another one when Ronnie Rossmoney was sitting in the temple with him during worship, and
Right.
she was thinking about her lawsuits, and he slaps her.
Yes.
You know, So yes, it's a very deep question, and I think it's a matter of buddhi when you're in a given circumstance. Yes, in as far as it goes with you, make every effort at peace. It is very important to be peaceful. Don't rely on it. Don't see it as the solution. It should be something that, and even if you don't win your case, you should really consider, what am I fighting over it? Is it worth violence or not? Right? If maybe if your neighbor has moved your fence line over one foot and they refuse to move it, and you've tried and tried and tried, maybe it's just time to give up and just accept, for the sake of peace, the sacrifice of 1 foot of the property for the time being. And so it's not only a matter of whether you get your way or not, but it's also a matter of what you're fighting over. How important or unimportant is it? And is it worth violence? Is it worth that level of reaction? And so it's a complex question, and I think the only thing I'm comfortable with, I can go either way, really, in my mind, because I can see the practicality of it. But I know that morality or right, those things aren't always a matter of practicality, obviously. But I do see the room for discussion, a room, even all the time. I don't think you can make a blanket rule for every situation. I think it's a nuance. But the idea is, don't be violent, right? And as a monk, I think it's absolute, because you've renounced everything. So what is it that you're, trying to defend in yourself or for yourself, right? I think monks can take up causes of others. I've seen that, and that's selfless. So I think that would be in accordance with your vows. But it wasn't violence toward others, though. I'm thinking of the self-immolation that was going on in Vietnam and whatnot. That was quite violent, but it was violence. It was their own sacrifice, giving up their own self for a cause. And I think that's saintly almost to me. That's an amazing undertaking, an amazing sacrifice, And Jesus says, that there is no, one man cannot show a higher form of love to another than to give his life for him. That's the ultimate relinquishment. So yes, I think that really it takes a developed buddhi, and I think as long as we're practicing our spiritual life, maintaining that clarity within our heart, understanding that our nature is divine love, right? That should guide us to almost an extreme level of peacefulness. But I do think, as demonstrated by even Holy Mother, stated by Swamiji and Ramakrishna, that there is room where violence would be appropriate. And it would also be the amount of violence, like Marie's son, just a single punch to the nose. That was just a statement. That wasn't going to maim him or kill him or anything. But it was a lesson. Boom, just one punch to the nose. If he had beat him to a pulp and the kid was hospitalized, we've got something else to talk about, right? It's not the same thing. And so it's measure by measure, in our buddhi. What am I fighting over, and what is it worth, right? And if violence comes, to what degree is violence helpful, right? Because the danger, I think, is attaching violence and your ability to be violent to your sense of self, to your egoism, right? If you take that being strong and being aggressive, which you see that quite a bit in these alpha male ideals running around these days. They haven't quite caught on, and I'm begging Mother that they don't. But these alpha male ideas are that hyper aggressive. You look at the ridiculous. Well, I don't want to get political, but you look at the language that's being used, around the Iran war. It's not helpful, right? It's not helpful, and something that was solved by peaceful means, is now being attempted through violent means for no reason, just simply a choice of violence, right? And so I think this is what the scriptures are talking about. I do think that she means absolute, and I think in her condition for her cause, she really has to, and I respect that. I'm not going to try. I would never counter that in her presence, just out of my deep respect for her ability to do it. and her commitment to doing it. And I think that's a very high ideal. But I do leave a little bit of room for somebody to know that there is a righteous, there can be a righteous war. There can be a righteous war. And you see that in Krishna when he's telling Arjuna, kill him. Go to war. It's a righteous war. It's a war with principle. And so in that way, I think it's important.
I
All
think
right.
I
What's
think
Swami,
that?
that
the
was
Pandavas tried everything, Swami. The Kauravas wouldn't give even an inch of space for them to live. So they tried everything, mediation. Krishna mediated. People,
Exactly.
Pandavas went and asked them nicely because they're their cousins, and they wouldn't barge in. They are ready for the war. They want to come.
Yes, yes, yes. No, it's
Choice.
true. They did. They went all the way down and they kept reducing their demand all the way down to the very minimum space they needed to survive. And even that was denied.
And that was denied. So
Yeah,
in such a case, yes, that was the needed one.
right. So I think that would be a good
The
reference.
legitimate, yes.
A good
We were
reference.
doing a Gita study circle. We're doing on the days that we don't have lecture or like Swami visits at our center.
Hmm.
And one of the gentlemen there is like very, very like intelligent on like the whole like story of the Mahabharata. And he was saying that the whole this side is dharmic and this side is not is actually like, for lack of better words, like not right. Both sides thought that they were dharmically correct because there was apparently like some stipulation that the Pandavas, after their exile, were to come back and remain incognito for a year. And I am going to butcher the explanation, but something happened where Arjuna had to protect his people and slaughtered like 100 men. And according to some different calendars, depending on who's tracking, the Pandavas said no. The Kauravas clocked that it was Arjuna. And they were like, you were supposed to stay incognito for a year upon returning. So now we can start a war on you. And the Pandavas were like, no, we were incognito for a year. And then that happened after. So according to different calendars and different ways of like time being kept, the requirements were met or weren't met. So the Kauravas thought that the requirements were not met. And so in their mind, they are dharmically correct to start the war. And the Pandavas were feeling like, no, we did everything you asked of us. So they felt like they were dharmically correct for starting the war. And then I also want to say, since we're talking about war, I grew up Catholic, and one of the things that I thought was like highly logical in the catechism was there are four core criteria for a just war. I'm going to read it off my phone because I don't have it memorized. But one of them is the war must be defensive against an aggressor and address a lasting, grave, and certain effect. The second one is all other means of resolution were rendered ineffective, so like negotiation or embargoes. There have to be serious prospects of there being success, so you're not sending a bunch of people off to slaughter for no reason. Like there has to be a serious prospect that they're going to win. And then the fourth is that the use of the arms do not produce evils greater than the evil that's to be eliminated. And then there are like two bonus points per se. I actually think there's 3 bonus points. One of them is that it's started by legitimate authority, not private parties, but people who speak for the common good. The right intention, so to right a wrong, not for power or vengeance. And then also the immunity of like non-combatants. So like you don't touch people who are not like aggressing. You leave behind, like don't touch people who aren't a part of the like fighting.
Right. Yeah, those sound wonderful to me. I'm glad you shared that. That's a nice, concise, well thought out way
Mm-hmm.
of talking about it. Excellent. Excellent. All right. The animal nature thinks in terms of using the jungle law of tooth and claw to eliminate all opposition. But this law solves no problems for humans. It can only postpone solutions, and in the long run, it worsens things. Right? But you can never eliminate all opposition, right? That's the thing. You've got an objective that can't be met, and so you're going to have endless violence if you're just pushing out opposition, right? Because opposition is how we grow. Opposition is how we ask questions and how we converse and discuss and learn from the situation. But this law solves no problems for humans. It can only postpone solutions, and in the long run, it worsens things, right? We can't go on killing each other. At some point, we really need to learn how to live together. We really need to learn, and it may be we can't live together, but we can live in peace, right? You can have your part of the world over there where you set your laws and you run your life in your way. And since we can't agree on how that should be done, we'll put a boundary between us. And on that side of the boundary, we respect you and leave you to your own devices. And on this side of the boundary, we live the way we're going to live in that way, So there are possible ways of being at peace, and we should always, always seek peace first, right? And then very much according to those Christian ideals you just shared, to follow those. You have to exhaust your effort to come up with a diplomatic or peaceful solution before you even think about the violence.
That works for mostly people who are reasonable people, Swami.
That's
with a
right.
good state of mind. But if
Yes.
a person is unhappy, contemptuous, all they got is violence inside. They
Mhm.
will never be able to share other than what they have, violence. They will always try to do violent way. They will never barge in the peaceful way. They
Yeah.
just don't. That is the only
No,
way.
that's true. There are lovers of violence.
They love violence so that they feel powerful when they are in violence and talking nonsense and arrogance and all this, but they're digging their grave deeper and deeper. One of these days, those type
Yeah.
of people will fall in their own grave, like Ravanasura, Bhasmasura, Hiranyakasipa, all these people. They had arrogance. Number one, arrogance and all this self-centeredness,
Mhm.
me. That's it. That's all they have. You can't change them. We can't change those people. But
Yeah.
somebody has to do something and it'll happen.
Yeah,
Yes.
it makes me think of that I don't know where this came from, but I've heard it several times where you're walking and you're holding a cup of tea and someone bumps into you and the tea spills everywhere and it spills on you and it burns you. Whose fault is it? And then a lot of people want to say, well, the person that bumped into you, they weren't looking out. But it's your fault. You had tea in your cup. So you need to make sure whatever is in your cup that's spilling out is something good.
Okay, yeah, for sure. If it takes it if you were watching out as you would have been aware of their not watching out. You could have gone another way yourself.
Or
That's
put a lid on it.
yes, or put a lid on it.
Or if you have like peace inside and someone bothers you, peace will come out. But if you're just violent and hateful on the inside and something bothers you, you're not, like Haima was saying, you're not gonna think about all these like things that are appropriate to do before going to violence. If you're violent on the inside, violence is what's going to spill out.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why the real answer to all these questions is do your practice.
Yeah, keep your heart
That
pure, and what
people
comes
in
out
a
should be okay.
power, in a powerful position, they're going to destroy whatever
Yes.
they destroy.
No, if they've got the means, that's absolutely right.
Exactly.
All right. So this law of the jungle, in their dealings with other nations, while they are at war, they recognize that pacifists cannot act that way and exempt them from military service. Instead, they usually either serve in non-military ways or spend time in prison. They are often called conscientious objectors. There are, of course, very few conscientious objectors, because very few have attained sufficient inner awakening at such an early age, and most of them move to Canada. Just kidding. When I talk about extensions of pacifism, I realize that I am speaking just to fellow pacifists, a very small group in any modern society. With this small group, a group that I admire and respect very much, I would like to discuss 3 extensions of pacifism that I have made. I have extended my pacifism to include non-use of psychological violence, as well as non-use of physical violence. Therefore, I no longer become angry. I not only do not say angry words, I do not even think angry thoughts. If someone does an unkind thing to me, I feel only compassion instead of resentment. Even upon those who cause suffering, I look with deep compassion, knowing the harvest of sorrow that lies in store for them. If there were those who hated me, I would love them in return, knowing that hatred can only be overcome by love, and knowing that there is good in all human beings which can be reached by a loving approach. Those who use the nonviolent method without love may have difficulty. If you force people to do things your way without helping to transform them, the problem is not really solved. If you can remember that we are not really separate from one another, it may increase your wish to transform instead of subdue, and to extend your pacifism to include non-use of psychological violence as well as the use of physical violence, right? So it sounds like what she's going to do with her extensions of nonviolence is basically approach true ahimsa, that there's no violence on any level, right? That on no level do you try to be provocative, whether it's in your actions or in your words or in your thoughts, right? Because that's one of the teachings of Jesus that is quite serious and very difficult to live up to. He says, if you think of doing a thing, you're guilty of doing the thing, right? So he wants your mental mind, your mental space, to be in harmony and in integrity with your physical space, right? There's no hypocrisy in us, and so I think I would tend to believe that, the more spiritual we become, the more aware of our nature we become, the closer to realization we become, the less likely we're going to be violent, right? But there is the possibility of it. Otherwise, the scriptures wouldn't have said that, if a seer, if a realized person commits murder, they don't get any karma for that, which means that there is an ultimately justified or harmonious way with our divine nature to actually bring about a death of someone. But I think that's an extreme case, and I don't think we need to use that to tilt our scale one way or the other. It's just there. It's there as an absolute, right? That if it's necessary, those things could happen. It could be just that he was saying that to make the point that, spiritual people really and truly are only motivated by divine love, by prema, and not by anything else, nothing in the ego. And because they don't see themselves operating by ego with a sense of attaining something, with a result for something, they're not going to be led to that. But even if they were, because they did not see themselves as doer, there would not be any karma accrued for that. So sensitive teachings, a very sensitive area, and I think that really for all of us, just do your practice, fall in love with the divine, go forward, and as best as you can, in every way possible, be peaceful. Shanti, 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 right? We say it all the time. Peace on the outside, peace on the inside, peace everywhere. All right. I wouldn't recommend civil disobedience except as a last resort. In general, people can accomplish much more out of jail than they can behind bars. Nor would I encourage any threatening action that advocates psychological violence as a solution to a problem solving. What is done to a single person affects us all. I have extended pacifism also to include non-payment for war as well as non-participation in war. Therefore, I no longer knowingly pay federal taxes. You didn't hear this here. For more than 43 years, I have lived below the income tax level. I admit, of course, that there is a second reason for this. I cannot accept more than I need, while others in the world have less than they need. Naturally, I have never paid taxes on liquor or tobacco because I never use these things. But also, I don't pay luxury tax because I don't use luxury items. And I don't pay amusement tax because I don't patronize amusements. Right? So that also brings another element into it, the way that you live, right? That we choose a way of life that is more in alignment with our nature. And it's not only when we come into conflict with people or places or things, right? That really the way that you live will determine very much how much you're contributing to the problem or to a problem. And so, you want to be very respectful of the world that we live in. Yes, we can do anything to this world, but is it helpful or is it right to do anything to this world? Of course not. We have to apply our ethics, our spiritual nature, to all things, to all beings, right? Now, the federal government may be supporting some things we approve of, but unfortunately, it is not presently possible to pay for them and not for war. A pacifist would answer no were the federal government to say, if you will spend half of your time on war activities, you may spend the other half of your time on good works. Yet there are pacifists who answer yes when it is a question of money instead of time. I realize that human beings tend to be inconsistent in one way or another, but since I feel I must be as consistent as I know how to be, I have extended my pacifism to include non-payment for war as well as non-participation in war, right? Just to not be a supporter in every way. So even if I'm just here, putting the caps on the ends of bullets, that's still an act of violence, right? Because I'm supporting the violence. I'm enabling the violence that bullet represents later down the line. So this watching our life to make sure that we're not violating a principle of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So you don't go out and buy the fastest, or the most gas guzzling car you can get because you like it, because you can, and it's a free country, right? You go out and you think, gosh, all of us have to survive together, and there's only a limited resource, and I should take that into mind and not use more than my share, right? To stick to a reasonable level of usage like that. So to live modestly, to take that center path, that middle way that Buddha liked to emphasize. I have extended my pacifism to include non-harming of creatures as well as non-harming of human beings. Therefore, for many years, I have not eaten flesh, not meat, fowl, or fish. I also don't use furs or feathers, leather or bone. I realize that some people are vegetarians merely for health reasons and are not necessarily opposed to war. Some people may miss the eating of flesh, but I do not. I don't crave animal flesh any more than the average person craves human flesh. I think most pacifists, in fact, most modern human beings, would not eat flesh if they had to kill the creatures themselves. I think if you were to visit a slaughterhouse, it might encourage you to extend your pacifism to include non-harming of creatures as well as non-harming of human beings. Yeah, how do you feel about that? I think most people would agree with that to a certain extent. I don't. I think it's worth a discussion within ourselves to decide, and I think whatever a person decides for himself as far as this vegetarianism or meat eater, it's going to be a personal decision, because I really feel like Mother put us in a situation where we cannot survive if we do not kill something, right? And yes, you can make the argument that killing a head of lettuce is less than killing a fish, but why? They've demonstrated the sentience of both of them in science. And so we're placed into a world as an organism that needs to eat other living things in order to survive. And so I think within that paradigm, I really like the way the Native Americans did it. At least I don't know anything about Native American culture, but I have seen a few documentaries. And one of the things was this idea that they would honor the animal, before killing it. That there was a ceremony that the bow and arrow wielder would do before actually using the arrow to kill the animal. And that when the animal then died, there was also a blessing and an understanding on the part of the person killing, thanking him. I understand I took your life, I will live according to principles so that you did not die in vain to keep me alive, to feed me, kind of thing. So a recognition of the sacrifice. But because we're already in that situation, I think there has to be room for people to decide for themselves where that line is. And I think both sides should have a nice reverence for the other side, right? Because it's one of those things. That's how we're going to live at peace. Some things we're just going to have to put up with in each other. Just allow people to be what they need to be. Give them the space, right, to do that within reason. I don't say that. I do not think that it was okay to go, ride across the country and kill all of the bison. That was not an ethical move, no matter what, because it was done with utterly no regard for life, right? And so that kind of attitude, that kind of extremism, is not to be included in this conversation. Did you have something, Rajani?
Yeah, I was just thinking like I take the special need kids to science class and they have a plant cells and the animal cells and their structure is more or less same. So I feel like people who are eating plant also somewhere they are killing a living thing.
Yes,
So
no, there's no doubt.
yes, so it's a personal choice how you said it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a necessity, but it doesn't have to be done with violence. That's the thing.
Yes.
That there is a way of being respectful and taking only what's necessary or what's needful and not wasting anything. That was another Native American ethic or value, is that after they would kill something and have done that ritual and shown their appreciation for the life of that animal, every single aspect of that animal would have been put to use. Nothing was wasted, and I think that is such a beautiful ideal. I think there's so much we can learn from those cultures. Anyway, it's hard to talk about these things without poking into politics a little bit somehow. But I think that those were beautiful ideals, and I think that those are the structures behind nonviolence that I think are beautiful and make life richer. Make life. It gives us clarity on life in that regard.
And Swami,
Yes.
in the Indian way of doing things, there are some aspects, some plants which are extremely useful in every way. That is, for example, the banana plant. We eat the stems, the flowers, we use the leaves, everyone, and those are used for worship. And and a lot of those things are considered sacred also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think
Just
that's the way I would like to see it, that to live in a sacred manner where you honor anything, and there's just an understanding, if you get eaten by a lion, you can offer yourself to the lion. May you live long and prosper. May I not give you cancer, right? Something like that. But anyway, I'm joking there just because it's how I'm put together. But it is important, I think, to make things, to allow things to be sacred. I think by nature we are sacred, and I think by nature these things feel right. They are in alignment with our divine nature. Whatever decision you make, it is not a license to kill in that sense. It's a license to understand that there is a time for it, but that the killing is never in violence. Violence is a taking of, it would be very hard to describe killing an animal as not being violent, but I think that you can kill an animal with a non-violent attitude, where you honor the life and you understand what's being lost and you understand that that's the circumstance of living that we've been given beyond our control, that we have to live it. We can't survive on rocks, and certainly if we could, we probably would, like that. I do not crave animal flesh any more than the average person craves human flesh. Oh, I'm glad I went back to that sentence. I think most pacifists, in fact, most modern human beings, would not eat flesh if they had to kill the creatures themselves. I think if you were to visit a slaughterhouse, it might encourage you to extend your pacifism to include a non-harming of creatures as well as a non-harming of human beings, right? And I think that would be probably true, because I think we have there's some cruelty in the way that is being done as a process these days. But I think, again, if you had a situation where an animal was not aware of the coming death, and the coming death was quick and done in the most careful of ways, that would be a different experience of that. That would be a very different experience of that. So there is room for expressing this in a sattvic way, right? So I think if you were to visit a slaughterhouse, it might encourage you to extend your pacifism to include non-harming of creatures as well as non-harming of human beings. There is an awakening taking place today that may very well develop into a new renaissance. Perhaps the wish to survive is pushing us this way. Perhaps it is the realization that something must be done about our present plight that motivates us. Groups that have traditionally used violence are talking about nonviolent resistance. People who have participated enthusiastically in war activities are becoming war resistors. An ever-increasing number of people are becoming pacifists. I am therefore expecting the pacifists to move forward also and to make some extensions of their pacifism. The following quotations were among the few notes that Peace Pilgrim carried in the pockets of her tunic, and we'll get to those in a minute. Right? But this idea here, an interesting idea arose in my mind while I was reading that. I was thinking, we've also, oddly enough, in a strange way, which it gets very complex, really with the weapons that we have, we've really have made war almost obsolete in a sense, because they're so destructive that really they would wipe us all out. And I think the lesson is really clear in that ultimately violence will destroy everyone, right? Because the weapons have just gotten so extreme. It's interesting that we go to war and don't use those weapons, right? So it's like, even though the weapons that we have teach us that there's no point to it because the end result is everybody dies, we ignore that, literally set that off to the side as a separate thing, and then go to war using conventional weapons like that, but not provoking the lesson, the final frontier, of pulling out the nuclears, and then everybody's devastated. There's no hope at all. And so instead of learning that lesson, we've sort of made a law so that we can keep going to war and not have to deal with exterminating everyone. So a very odd mentality, a very twisted way of thinking in a way. It's like, if there's enough compassion not to use a nuclear weapon, there should be enough compassion not to use a conventional weapon, right? And maybe, back in the day when it was just you and your opponent with a sword, that was very direct and very experienced, and it was its own deterrent, right? But then when you could sit somewhere and shoot somebody without knowing their name or seeing their face, that changed the nature of it, right? And now that we've got machines that can do it for us, this makes it even more cheap, right? And even a bigger ethical question. It's like, because what I get nervous at is that if we've got all of these drones that are fighting our war, we'll be much more willing to go to war. And because the price of war will be so much less than it is when people are having to do the fighting. And so,
Swami, you said compassion. I don't know if I'm cynical. Yes, I am. It is not compassion. It's only self-preservation that we don't use nuclear. Yeah.
yeah. Well, okay. Yeah, I can see that. You know, you could also say that that's just compassion for ourselves.
Ourselves, yeah. Yes.
Right. So, which oddly and again in that odd way, if I'm worth saving, then so is my neighbor. You know, we should, if we take it any direction that you take it, if you take it to its end, the words of Jesus become more closely true. More seems like the right way. Like, just don't start doing violence. There just has to be something better. And maybe with your neighbor, when there's no way for you to get them together, then maybe it's time for a council or time for the neighborhood to get together and go in and enforce a reasonable and nonviolent outcome. Something like that. Anyway, these are all ideas, and these questions have been going on for as long as there's been people, and will probably keep going. But I think for us, always remember the ideal of love and exercise that to the extreme if you're able, but at least until the farthest extent that you can do possibly. Right? Would be wonderful. All right, it's 5:30, so we're going to stop there for today.